This story, The Telltale Heart, is about a man whose mind slowly unravels after committing a hidden crime as guilt begins to distort his reality. What seems like a calm and controlled life gradually turns into intense psychological pressure and paranoia. As the story unfolds, you experience how his own mind becomes the greatest force of punishment against him. Our stories start with one cold, restless evening in the autumn of 18. The wind pressed softly against the windows, and the city outside felt distant, almost forgotten. Inside a quiet apartment, tucked away on a narrow street, I sat with my friend, Auguste Dupin. The room was small, shadowed, filled with the slow, drifting curls of smoke. For over an hour, neither of us had spoken. To anyone watching, it would seem as though we were lost in silence, simply observing the faint spirals rising into the dim air. But my mind was far from quiet. I was thinking about something we had discussed earlier that evening. A case, a strange, unsettling case. The brutal affair on Rue Morgue and the mystery surrounding the death of Marie Roget. The details still lingered in my thoughts, unresolved, uncomfortable. So when the door suddenly opened, it felt less like interruption and more like coincidence. Standing there was an old acquaintance, Monsieur, the prefect of the Persian police. We welcomed him warmly, not because he was admirable, but because he was interesting. There was something about him half amusing, half deeply flawed. It had been years since we last saw him. The room remained dim. Dupin rose slowly, moving toward the lamp, but before he could light it, the prefect spoke. He hadn't come for a visit, he had come for help. Or more precisely, he wanted Dupin's opinion. There's a matter, he said, one that has caused considerable difficulty. Dupin paused, then calmly replied, if it requires thought, we should examine it in the dark. The prefect let out a small laugh. There you go again, he said, always with your odd ideas. To him, anything he couldn't understand was simply labeled strange. Dupin smiled faintly, said nothing. Instead, he handed him a pipe and gently pushed a chair closer. I leaned forward, curious. And what seems to be the problem? I asked. Nothing. Violent, I hope? The prefect shook his head. No, nothing like that. In fact, it's quite simple. So simple, actually, that we should have solved it already. He paused, then added quietly, but somehow it continues to escape us. Dupin's eyes narrowed slightly. Perhaps it is the simplicity itself that misleads you. The prefect burst into laughter. What nonsense, he said. Dupin remained calm. Or perhaps the truth is simply too obvious. The prefect shook his head again, almost amused, almost irritated. Who, he said, has ever heard of such a thing? A little too self-evident. The prefect suddenly burst into laughter, a loud, uncontrolled laugh, filling the quiet room. Ha ha ha. Dupin, you will be the death of me yet. But Dupin said nothing, only watched him calmly. I leaned forward again, curious now. So tell us, I asked, what is the matter? The prefect slowly leaned back in his chair, puffing his pipe with long, thoughtful breaths. Then, in a lower tone, he spoke.
I must warn you, this is a matter of extreme secrecy. If it becomes known that I am speaking of it,
I would very likely lose my position. A silence followed. Proceed, I said. Or not, Dupin added quietly. The prefect hesitated, then continued. A document of the highest importance has been stolen from the royal apartments. I exchanged a glance with Dupin. The man who took it is known. He was seen. There is no doubt of it, and it is also known that the document is still in his possession. Dupin's eyes narrowed slightly. How is that known? He asked. The prefect exhaled slowly. It is inferred from the nature of the document and from the absence of certain consequences that would have already occurred if it had changed hands. I frowned. Be clearer, I said. The prefect nodded. The paper gives its holder power. Very significant power in a very sensitive place. He paused again. The kind of power that could influence affairs of the highest importance. Dupin remained still, listening. Still, I said, I don't fully understand. The prefect leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice. If revealed to a third party, it would damage the honor of a person of extremely high rank, and because of that, the one who holds the document has control over that person. I interrupted, but that control would depend on whether the thief knows that the victim knows who he is. I stopped mid-sentence. The thought suddenly felt more complicated. The more I spoke it aloud, who would dare? The thief. The prefect spoke slowly now, more serious than before. The thief is Minister D. A silence fell in the room. He continued. A man who dares everything, both what is proper and what is not. The method of the theft was not simple. It was calculated, precise, almost elegant in its execution. The document, a letter, had been received in private inside the royal boudoir. The woman was alone when she began reading it, but then the door suddenly opened. Another high-ranking person entered, someone she desperately wished to keep the letter hidden from. She tried quickly to hide it, a drawer, a desk, anything, but there was no time. In panic, she left the letter open on the table. The address was visible, but not the contents. At that exact moment, Minister Duge entered the room, his eyes sharp, instant. Calculating, he noticed everything. The letter, the handwriting, the tension in the room, and in a single moment, he understood. A short conversation followed, casual, controlled, political. Then he acted. He produced a similar letter, opened it, and pretended to read it. Then slowly, he placed it beside the original. They looked identical in placement, but not in value. He continued speaking as if nothing mattered for nearly 15 minutes. Finally, he stood up. As he left, he took the real letter. The woman saw it, but she did not speak. She could not in front of the third person in the room. So she remained silent, and the minister left with the stolen document, leaving behind only a useless copy. A perfect theft, quiet and visible, complete. Dupin exhaled slowly, smoke drifting upward. So, he said calmly, this is exactly what you needed. The thief understands what the victim knows about him. The prefect nodded. Yes. and that knowledge has given him power. For months now, it has been used for political influence. The victim knows this, every day more clearly, and yet she cannot act openly. So finally, she came to me. Dupin leaned back slightly, a faint smile forming. Then, he said quietly, "You have come to the right place." The prefect nodded quickly, almost relieved. I have searched his residence thoroughly, but always in secret. If he even suspects the search, it would be disastrous. I leaned forward slightly, observing the prefect, but I said, "You are experienced in these matters? The Paris police have handled such cases before." The prefect nodded, slowly, confidently. "Oh yes, and that is exactly why I did not give up." He paused, then continued. "The minister's habits gave me an advantage. He is often away at night. His servants are few and careless. They sleep far from his chambers, and most of them are easily distracted." A faint smile crossed his face. "I have keys to nearly every room in Paris. For 3 months, not a single night passed without me searching his residence." A long silence followed. My honor was at stake, and the reward was extremely high. So I continued until I was certain of one thing. The prefect's voice lowered slightly. "The thief is more intelligent than I am." He exhaled. "I have searched every corner, every possible hiding place, and yet I found nothing." I leaned in. "But is it possible that the letter is hidden elsewhere?" "Not inside the house," the prefect hesitated. "Possible, but unlikely." Dupin finally spoke, calm, controlled. "In the current political situation, the letter must be immediately available. To produce it at any moment is as important as possessing it." I frowned. "Meaning?" I asked. "To destroy it," Dupin replied. A pause. Heavy. I nodded slowly. "So it must still be inside the house?" "Not on his person." The prefect shook his head. "Impossible. We have searched him twice." "Personally," Dupin gave a faint smile. "As expected," he said quietly. "Du is not foolish. He would anticipate such searches." The prefect shrugged. "Not a fool, but a poet. And that," he added, "I consider only one step away from foolishness." A brief silence. Dupin took a slow draw from his pipe. "Perhaps," he said calmly, "I have been guilty of poetry myself." "Then tell me," I said slowly. "Describe exactly how you searched." The prefect leaned forward, calm, confident, almost proud. "We took our time, and we searched everything. I have years of experience in these matters. We began with the entire building, room by room. Each night, dedicated to a single section. First, we examined the furniture. Every drawer was opened, every cabinet inspected. And let me assure you, to a trained investigator, there is no such thing as a secret drawer." A pause, then he continued. "A hidden compartment is always detectable. Every cabinet has measurable space, and we account for all of it. Even the smallest fraction would not escape us." I listened carefully. After the cabinets, we moved to the chairs, each cushion carefully probed, using long, fine needles, then the tables. We even removed their tops. I raised my eyebrows. "Why?" I asked. The prefect explained calmly. because sometimes the top is used as concealment, the structure is hollowed, an object placed inside, then sealed again. Even bedposts are used the same way. I nodded slowly. But surely sounding the cavity would reveal it? Not necessarily, he replied, if properly packed. Even sound detection becomes useless, and besides, we worked in silence. I leaned forward again, but you couldn't dismantle everything. A letter can be extremely compact, thin, rolled tightly, almost invisible. It could be hidden inside the smallest structural space. Even chair joints, the prefect nodded. Of course, not everything was dismantled, but everything was examined. With precision, he paused. The rungs of every chair were inspected. Even the joints of furniture were analyzed. Using a microscope, I blinked slightly, and any disturbance would be visible instantly. Even a grain of dust would be evidence. A silence followed. I continued. And mirrors? Yes. And spaces between boards? Yes. And beds. Curtains, carpets, everyone. He answered without hesitation, then continued. When furniture was complete, we expanded the search. The entire house, divided into sections, numbered, mapped. Every inch examined, including adjacent buildings. All of it scrutinized under a microscope. Nothing was missed. Nothing overlooked. The two houses adjoining, I exclaimed. You must have faced serious difficulty. The prefect nodded. Yes. But the reward is enormous. I leaned forward. And the grounds? Were they included in the search? Every part of them? Even the gardens are paved in brick. We examined every section, every gap between the bricks. Even the moss was inspected closely. Nothing was disturbed. I continued questioning. And the papers? The books? The library? Of course, every document, every parcel was opened. Every book was taken apart, not just shaken, as some officers do, but carefully examined, page by page. Even the bindings were measured. Every detail checked under a microscope. If anything had been altered, we would have known instantly. Even newly bound books were probed carefully. I nodded slowly, and the floors, beneath the carpets, examined. The carpets themselves removed, the walls inspected. The cellars? Yes. A long pause followed. I spoke quietly. Then you must be mistaken. The letter is not there. The prefect's expression tightened. I fear you are right. I leaned back slightly. So what now? Dupin spoke calmly. Search again. The prefect sighed. That is unnecessary. I am certain, beyond doubt, it is not in the house. Dupin observed him quietly. I have no better advice to give. The prefect hesitated. Of course, you have a description of the letter? Yes. He opened his notebook and began reading. A detailed description of the missing document, both its internal structure and external appearance. When he finished, he stood up slowly. His mood had changed. He was no longer confident. No, he was frustrated and slightly defeated. A month passed, then he returned, this time calmer, but still uncertain. He sat down, lit his pipe, and began casual conversation, as if nothing had happened, but I could tell something had changed. And then I spoke. "So tell me, G," I said quietly, "what of the stolen letter? Have you finally accepted that the minister cannot be outwitted?" The prefect exhaled sharply. Damn him. Yes, I searched again, just as Dupin suggested, but it was useless. Exactly as I expected, I leaned forward. "And the reward? How much is it now?" The prefect hesitated. "A very large sum. I would personally pay 50,000 francs. To anyone who could recover that letter." He paused. "And no, they have doubled it, but even if they tripled it, I could not do more than I have already done." Dupin listened silently, then spoke slowly. "Gee, I think you have not exhausted every option." A faint pause, smoke drifting. "You might still take further steps." The prefect frowned. "What steps?" Dupin leaned back slightly. "Perhaps you should seek advice." He paused again. "Do you know the story of Abernethy?" The prefect snapped back. "No, and I don't care." Dupin smiled faintly. "Once, a wealthy man went to a doctor, but instead of asking directly, he disguised his question. He described symptoms as if they belonged to someone else, then asked, 'What would you prescribe?' The doctor replied simply, 'Take advice.'" A silence followed. The prefect shifted uncomfortably. "I am willing to take advice, and I am willing to pay for it. 50,000 francs for the solution." Dupin paused, then calmly stood up. He opened the drawer, took out a checkbook, and placed it on the table. "You may write the amount. When it is signed, I will give you the letter." A dead silence fell. The prefect froze, completely stunned. He stared at Dupin, unmoving, unblinking. Minutes passed, then slowly, he picked up the pen. Still confused, still uncertain, he filled up a check. 50,000 francs, signed it, and handed it over. Dupin examined it carefully, then placed it in his pocket. He walked to an escritoire, unlocked it, and took out a letter. He placed it on the table. Without a word, he handed it over. The prefect grabbed it instantly. His hands were shaking. He opened it, read it. A flash of realization, then relief. He didn't speak, not a single word. He rushed to the door. Then out of the house, gone, silence returned. Dupin sat back down, calm, collected, as if nothing had happened. After the prefect had left, my friend leaned back in his chair and began to speak. "The Paris police," he said calmly, "are competent in their own way. They are persistent, clever, and trained exactly for their kind of work." He paused slightly. "So when G explained his search, I had no doubt that it was thorough." I looked at him. "Thorough?" I repeated. "Yes," Dupin replied. "In fact, the search was executed perfectly. If the letter had been there, they would have found it." I gave a slight laugh. But Dupin remained serious. The flaw was not in execution, but in understanding. He leaned forward slightly. "The prefect has a fixed method, a rigid system. To him, every problem fits a pattern, but reality does not always obey patterns." He paused. "He often becomes too deep or too shallow for the situation at hand." Then he added quietly, "Even a child can reason better than him." I raised an eyebrow. "A child?" "Yes. I once knew a schoolboy who was remarkable at a simple game. He paused again, a game of guessing, even or odd. He continued, one player hides marbles, and the other must guess whether the number is even or odd. If correct, he wins. If wrong, he loses. Dupin's tone remained steady. This boy won all the games, not by luck, but by observation. And by reading his opponent, he adjusted his thinking based on the mind in front of him. For example, if his opponent was simple-minded, he would guess one way. But if slightly more clever, he would adjust again, always predicting not the game, but the person. He paused, and in its purest form, "What is this reasoning?" He looked at me calmly, nothing more. Then identifying the mind of another and thinking ahead of it, silence followed. The room felt still again, but now, the meaning of everything we had discussed was becoming clearer. "It is simply," I said quietly, "a matching of one mind to another." Dupin nodded, yes, and when I asked the boy how he managed this skill, he gave a very simple answer. "When I want to understand someone, I copy their expression, and then I observe what thoughts arise in me, as if my mind were reflecting theirs." A pause. This principle lies beneath many so-called great philosophies. He mentioned names quietly: Rochefoucauld, La Bougue, Machiavelli, Campanella. But in truth, it is very simple. I leaned forward. "So everything depends on correctly judging another person's intelligence?" "Exactly," Dupin replied. "And that is where the prefect fails. He assumes all minds work like his own, and so he searches only in the ways he himself would hide something." A pause. "But criminals do not think alike. And when their intelligence differs, the prefect becomes blind." He continued calmly. "In this case, he searched every possible hiding place, based only on his own imagination, but he never considered that the minister might think differently." I listened carefully. He believed that every man hides things in clever secret places, in hidden compartments or concealed cavities. But that assumption is exactly what leads to failure. He leaned back slightly because such hiding places are obvious to trained searchers. They depend only on patience, not intelligence, and when the reward is high, no detail is ever missed. I nodded slowly. So the mistake was assuming the minister was predictable? Precisely. They assumed because he is a poet, he must think foolishly. A faint smile crossed Dupin's face. But that assumption is dangerous because the minister is not only a poet, he is also a mathematician. I raised my eyebrows. A mathematician? Yes, and a poet, and that combination creates something very rare. I was surprised, but the world believes that mathematical reasoning is the highest form of logic. Dupin shook his head slightly. That belief is incomplete. Dupin paused, letting the smoke drift slowly upward, and so he continued calmly, "The error of the prefect is not merely ignorance, but habit, a fixed way of thinking that never adapts." He looked at me directly. "They assume logic is universal, when in fact, it is often situational." A brief silence filled the room, and because of that, they search only within familiar patterns, never outside them. He tapped the table lightly, "And that is why they fail." Every time. Consistently. Predictably. Then he leaned back again. No. We returned to the minister, Dupin continued calmly, still speaking as if every detail had been prepared in advance. What I mean is this: if the minister had been only a mathematician, the prefect would never have needed to involve me. He paused slightly, but I know him differently. Not just as a mathematician, but also as a poet. And more than that, a courtier. A man skilled in politics and deception. I listened without interrupting, so I did not assume that he would think like an ordinary man. He is aware of police methods. He understands how searches are conducted, and therefore, he would anticipate every possible intrusion. Dupin leaned forward slightly. Even his absences at night were not mistakes. They were deliberate, designed to encourage search, to make the police believe. They were succeeding. He exhaled slowly, and in the end, they did believe it. They concluded the letter was not there. Exactly as he intended. A brief silence followed. I also knew something else, Dupin continued. The minister understands our logic, the logic of search, and therefore, he would reject all obvious hiding places, every secret drawer, every hollow, every concealed compartment would be meaningless to him. I nodded slowly. So he would avoid complexity, Dupin said, and choose simplicity instead. A pause, because he knew that complexity is exactly what we expect, and therefore, what we search first. He looked at me directly, and that is why he succeeded in misleading them. The prefect had been confident because the search was thorough. But thoroughness itself had become predictable. Dupin leaned back again, and now we come to the key idea. The minister is not hiding from force. He is hiding from expectation. A silence deepened in the room. Then Dupin continued softly. The material world often reflects the mental world. Just as heavy objects resist motion, complex minds resist simple interpretation. But once in motion, they become far more powerful. He paused again. And this applies to intelligence as well. Some minds are difficult to move at first, but when they act with precision. I listened closely. And have you ever noticed? Dupin asked which objects attract attention most easily. He let the question hang in the air. I have never thought about it, I replied. Dupin smiled faintly. Then let me explain. He said quietly, there is a game, played on a map, where one player hides a word and the other must find it. Sometimes the words are small, hidden in detail, but the expert player does not choose small words. He chooses large ones, words that stretch across the entire map, impossible to miss. Yet, they are often overlooked because the mind assumes that what is obvious cannot be important. A pause. And this is exactly where the prefect fails. He never considers that something might be hidden by not being hidden at all. A silence followed. Dupin continued. The minister understands this. He knows that anything complex will be searched, so he avoids complexity entirely, and instead, he uses simplicity so bold that it becomes invisible. I watched him carefully, and that is why, I said slowly. He placed the letter where no one would think to look. Dupin nodded. Exactly. A long pause followed. I decided to test this idea. One morning, I visited the minister's residence. He spoke casually, as if by coincidence, but in truth, it was deliberate. I wore green spectacles to hide my eyes and observe without suspicion. The minister was there, relaxed, idle, almost bored. But I knew better. He was never truly idle, only appearing so. When observed, I spoke with him casually, while slowly scanning the room, every object, every surface, every detail. A writing table caught my attention, covered in scattered papers. Letters. Books, small instruments, but nothing unusual. Nothing that stood out. I moved on, slowly circling the room, until my attention stopped at a small card rack hanging from the wall. Cheap, clumsy, almost meaningless. Inside it were a few visiting cards and one letter. Worn, crumpled, half-torn, black seal visible, marked with the minister's cipher. It looked unimportant, almost discarded. But I studied it carefully. It was placed openly, carelessly, almost insultingly obvious, and yet perfectly hidden. No sooner had I seen the letter, I realized it was the one I had been searching for. At first glance, it appeared completely different from the description given by the prefect. Different seal, different appearance, different condition, but that difference was exactly the point. The original letter had a red seal. Here, it was black. The original address was formal and clear. Here, it was small and feminine. Even the condition of the paper was deliberately altered, dirty, torn, almost worthless in appearance, but that was not neglect. It was strategy. Everything about it was designed to mislead the observer, to suggest irrelevance, and therefore to avoid suspicion entirely. But I knew better, because true concealment does not hide in secrecy. It hides in plain sight. I continued my visit, engaging the minister in conversation, keeping him distracted, while carefully observing the letter, every detail, every edge, every fold. And then I noticed something crucial. The edges of the paper were unusual, not naturally worn, but mechanically altered, as if folded, then refolded in reverse, inside out. That was the confirmation. The letter had been turned, repackaged, disguised, its identity reversed. I knew then. It was authentic. So I took my leave, casual, controlled, leaving behind a gold snuff box, as if by accident. The next day, I returned to retrieve it. The minister welcomed me again, relaxed, unaware. We spoke normally as before, then suddenly, a loud disturbance erupted outside, a gunshot-like sound, followed by screams. Chaos in the street. The minister rushed to the window to see what had happened. I moved immediately. Back to the card rack, I removed the letter quietly, efficiently, and replaced it with a perfect copy, prepared earlier. Even the seal was replicated using simple material, bread. The disturbance outside was a diversion, a staged panic created by a man in my employ to ensure my movement went unnoticed. Once complete, I left the house calmly, naturally. No alarm was raised, no suspicion formed, and the letter was now in my possession. The prefect later asked me why I did not simply take it openly. I replied calmly, that would not have worked. because the minister would have known instantly, and once alerted, the advantage would be lost forever. Dupin spoke calmly, almost as if the matter was already settled. He said, is not a careless man. He is bold, dangerous, and highly intelligent. He paused briefly, and his position is protected by loyal attendants. If I had attempted force, I would not have left alive. A quiet pause followed. But that was never my plan. I listened closely. I also had another reason, my political views. In this matter, I act on behalf of the lady involved. He leaned slightly forward. For 18 months, the minister has controlled her. Now she controls him. Because he still believes the letter is in his possession, so he will act as before. And in doing so, he will destroy himself. A faint smile crossed his face. The fall of powerful men is rarely graceful. He paused. People speak of easy descent, but in reality, climbing down is always harder than climbing up. I remain silent. I feel no sympathy for him. He is a dangerous man, a genius without principle. Then Dupin added quietly, but I admit, I would like to know his thoughts when he opens the letter and realizes he has been deceived. I looked at him. Did you leave anything inside it? Dupin nodded slightly. Yes. I did not leave it empty. That would have been an insult. He paused. Years ago, he once wronged me in Vienna. I told him then that I would remember. A brief silence followed. So I left him something he would recognize. He continued calmly. He knows my handwriting. So I copied a verse into the center of the page. Dupin recited softly, a design so fatal, if not worthy of Atreus, is worthy of Thyestes. A silence filled the room. The message was clear. The game was over, but the meaning would remain with the minister long after the letter was gone.